want to take a few moments of your time to tell everyone about Military Broadcast Radio, or MBR for short, a veterans radio station in Boulder, Colorado that helps with podcast and media training for disabled and transitioning veterans looking for a way to give voice to what's on their minds. They also provide support for those veterans in need through direct support or veterans help organizations. They can be found on the internet at www.mbradio.us and on social media through their YouTube channel, MB Radio, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and Rumble. MBR Radio is a nonprofit and relies strictly on corporate donors and viewers who subscribe and like the shows. If you wish to donate, please visit their website and check the Sponsor or Donate tab. However you decide to support this program, it is all greatly appreciated by all the veterans who contribute to the programming on this station. I thank you on behalf of MBR Radio for listening to this. Kid Felcha, 1,000 welcomes to the Village Oak Tree for June 12th, 2024. I'm your host, Terrence O'Donnell, and I want to thank everybody for joining me again. Once again, I got my friend Mitch, and we're going to nail everybody out there with all the current events and stuff at home, all the things that matter to us on a daily basis. So, Mitch, let's see what we can do here.
No trouble at all.
To start off with, you were saying earlier that you were having plumbing problems.
Well, that's just how life goes. Everything seems to have a life expectancy. What's interesting to me is that I needed to get a connection for the spray nozzle on my kitchen sink. As simple as that. And there was none available at any of the big box stores. I went to Lowe's, I went to Ace, I went to Home Depot. I was told that the sink itself is 10 years old and they don't make connections for that sink anymore.
Right.
So I have to replace the sink.
What?
That's what... For me to get a spray hose to work, I can't get a jack, a simple connection. So I'm working around it. I'm getting something else done. I'm going to rig something that'll get it to work. But to just buy a part in the store off the shelf is not available to me right now.
Well, eBay might be your best friend right now.
Correct. The interesting thing is it seems that everything is disposable.
Yeah.
They don't want you to have a part to repair. They want you to get a whole new bloody sink. And that's interesting. It's sad, but it's interesting.
That's been going on for a couple of decades that I know of. I mean, I keep telling people stories about when I had my own appliance repair business. I was a service company and doing warranty work for these big companies like General Electric and all these other ones. I even got a letter, I think it was 2006, if I remember right. I think it was 2006. It was right after I started doing warranty work for General Electric. I got a letter from their company telling me that they were incorporating planned obsolescence in their machines going forward, and not to tell any of my customers that, but for the plan, as a servicer to plan for it. And I thought to myself, you got to be kidding me. Really? And my company was located in a very, very extremely rural part of the United States. So the majority of my customers were still using 20 and 25-year-old machines and expecting me to find parts to repair them with. And, at that time, I still could. Back in the middle aughts, as they call it, decade now, I was still able to, I had a vendor, down in southern Maine, Portland, Maine, that I could still get a lot of those old parts for. It wasn't a lot of things, but they still had a pretty good stock of old stuff. So I had purchased inventory and had them on my shelf because I already had a feeling that this was going to be a thing. And it turns out I was right. But the upshot of it was I had all of these customers expect me to repair their old machines.
Right.
And as time went by, after 2006, I realized that part shortage was starting to become a real thing, and I would notify my customers accordingly. And then after I got that letter, I thought to myself, you know what? There's no way I'm not telling my customers. Okay. And it turns out it wasn't just General Electric. Whirlpool was in on it. Frigidaire having their own issues. And I thought, well, this must be a thing across the industry they've just decided that it's it's call more cost effective for them to just have customers buy new machines every 6 to 8 years rather than to keep supplying parts to guys like me.
That's so disappointing.
It is. Yeah, I was upset. I mean, it's like anything else. Because even though I was a warranty servicer, mentally I still considered myself a consumer.
Hmm.
Okay. I mean, like anybody else. And I'm thinking, okay, you're doing this to everybody across the country. There's something
Right.
seriously wrong with you guys.
And then if you add to that that we have to build these parts out of raw materials and then toss the old
Right.
ones into landfills everywhere, we're destroying the
Right.
environment
Uh-huh.
continuously. It's not. It's just not sensible. But
Well,
I guess the bottom line is the bottom line. People want to make their money.
it's all about the corporate mentality of we're going to make money any way we can. We don't care about the environment. We don't care about the consumers. All we care
Mhm.
about is making money.
Well, as a slightly related topic, did you see that in China recently they are working towards curing diabetes?
Oh,
Did
really?
you see that? Yeah, and they made some progress. Now you won't find that happening here. There's
No.
no need to cure it. So the companies will continue to make money selling the insulin.
Right.
But the Chinese mentality would be, let's fix it so that we can keep people working. So
Well,
there's a
yeah.
difference in mindset in terms of how we organize a society. Do we organize it to take care of the people that are here, or do we organize it for money? And the money is winning in the West.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very true. And, and I just thought of something, considering all the tariffs and stuff that the United States has started imposing on China now, how much you want to bet they do something to restrict the imports of this, whatever it is they come up with here down the
Oh, they're
road?
going to restrict that. They're going to restrict that, no doubt about it, because it's not cost effective for them to cure it. It's better to keep people sick.
Yeah. Not here in the United States anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then even
That's crazy.
the tariffs don't really make that much sense because people around the world are going to be buying those vehicles or whatever they're
Uh-huh.
tariffing at a lower cost.
Right.
And their production costs are going to be lower around the world. So
Well, yeah.
America is going to have to compete with that.
Well, I mean, Europe, I saw something last week. Europe and somebody else are going to be putting, imposing tariffs on these cars as well. But
Okay.
it's not going to be anywhere near the amount that the United States is doing. I mean, I think
Well,
Europe, EU said something like 25% or
hmm
27% or some
hmm
kind of thing like that, which to me actually makes sense. I mean, that's actually fairly normal. I mean,
okay.
China's not having any kind of, qualms about it because they're kind of expecting it to a degree.
Well, what happens when China decides, okay, well, the batteries that we make, that we are number one in the world, we're going to restrict the flow of it to the West. So the
Oh,
cost of
there.
batteries are going to go up
Yeah.
for
Well, I mean, they're
everybody that's
already
manufacturing.
yeah, they're already restricting them coming to the United States, so it's a
So
given.
think about the cost of the cars in the US that are going to be
Uh-huh.
using those batteries. They're going to be much higher.
I
Nobody
really don't.
wins.
Well, no, nobody here in the United States is going to win. I mean, that's
Mm-mm.
that's the bottom line right there. And this
Mhm.
whole business of, um, making their cars in Mexico and then having them and Mexican people
Mhm.
ship them up. I say not the Mexican people. It's the the companies. They'll be Chinese
Mhm.
owned. They'll be Mexican owned, run by the Chinese.
Right.
I guess. I mean, I guess that's how they expect to get around some of this stuff.
Mhm.
And then they're going to be shipping the cars across the southern border
Mhm.
under a Mexican name,
Right.
hoping to get by these tariff sanctions.
People
So,
will find a way.
well, I
They will
mean, they
find a way.
will, but I
Mhm.
have to wonder what Washington D.C. is going to do about it, and they're going to shut that down too.
Well, protecting your environment, protecting your industry works for a while, but people get around it in the first instance. And then
Hmm.
not only that, people will respond with tariffs of their own.
Right,
So
right.
it's not going to be as easy as we're just going to just slap tariffs on China and get away with it.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't think
no,
they're
no,
going to
no.
be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, China's already started slapping restrictions on stuff here, imported
Mhm.
restrictions and things in retaliation to the United States. So, I mean, it's just going to keep going, and it's
It's going to
crazy.
keep going.
And
It's
the only
going to keep
people who are
going.
going to suffer are the average Joes like you and me.
Correct. And then you can't get parts for your kitchen sink.
Right,
So,
right. Well, I mean, I had just to kind of go along with what you were saying. You know, here at my house today, I've had contractors.
Mhm.
As I said, I was going to be busy this morning, so I had my lawn sprinkler guy come out and do his annual spring repairs.
Hmm.
So I bought this house. It's was built in 2003. So everything, the infrastructure is, the age of the house. So that goes with certain other things. So certain things are starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
seems like every spring now, I've got to get repairs done on my lawn sprinkler system,
Hmm.
and it's not something that I can do without because I live in a HOA managed subdivision, so they
Right.
require me to
Yeah.
have lawn sprinklers whether I want them or not.
I hate
Uh,
HOAs.
yeah, I
I'm
know,
not kidding you.
it's one of those deals. I basically kind of weighed the options. Um, I knew that the HOA system here was pretty tight. It's expensive, but my wife loved the house, and I thought, well, you know what? It's it's not a small price to pay, but it's a price I'm willing to pay to keep, to make her happy. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
so we'll just eat it and go.
Hmm.
But along with that, I'm dealing with 20-year-old infrastructure. So,
Yep.
case in point, last weekend, I went out and turned on the main water valve and put the sprinkler system into test mode to make sure everything was working right. And invariably, I found problems. And one
Hmm.
of them, I had a busted pipe down at the end of my driveway, so that had to be fixed. I
Hmm.
had a sprinkler head that was frozen in the ground, had to be fixed.
Hmm.
So I called my guy up, say, hey, can you come out? The same old deal. And I go through this every spring, seems like.
Right.
Um, and then I was going to say last Thursday, Friday, some young man come to the door and said he was doing pest control. And normally don't, I don't buy into that stuff, but he
Right.
had a pretty good little program. So I listened to him. Of course, the other part of that is my wife is on the other side of me, not physically, not literally, but she had been complaining to me the last couple of weeks that we got ants in the front lawn and the back lawn. They're getting on the
Hmm.
patio.
Hmm.
We got
Hmm.
spider webs on the side of the house, all that kind of stuff. So, I've been doing my best to take care of it myself, but there's only so
Right.
much I can do.
Yes.
So when this guy came to the door the other day, I thought to myself, yeah, maybe because typically they're pretty expensive.
Yes.
So I got smart. I waited till my wife to get home from her outing with her girlfriends. So I told her what the guy's offering for a price. And she said, you know, it's a little expensive, but I really want the spiders and the ants gone. I'm like, all right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the guy came back, when he said he was going on. We talked to him. And he offered me even a better deal on a 1-year contract just to get my business.
Okay.
So I
That was
thought,
good.
I said, okay. So we bit. So today, one of his employees was out and to do the first initial screen. And so I've got this piece of fancy trim over one of my bedroom windows on the outside, and it's mounted into the brick fascia of the house. So 3 years ago, when I bought the house, I had hired a handyman because I got told by the how the inspector that it was loose. Now, it hadn't
Right.
fallen off; it was just loose. So I hired this guy to tighten it up and make it right. So today, 3 years later, my pest control guy's out there with his brush, and he brushed against it with his brush, trying to get rid of the spider webs, and it fell off. It almost hit him.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm out there looking at this thing, and I realized that the handyman that I hired 3.5 years ago, didn't do anywhere near the kind of job he should have done. I mean, it was absolutely terrible,
Right.
and I thought to myself, this is the kind of people you get when you are busy and you can't. I shouldn't have had to supervise this guy. He's supposed to know what
Correct.
he's doing.
Correct.
Obviously, he didn't. So now I've got somebody else coming out to redo this job that I paid this guy 3.5 years ago to do.
Well, what happens with some of these guys is they fix it just enough that you call them back,
Yeah, well,
you
I
know?
told this guy I am never calling him back. That was 3 years ago.
But what I also noticed, like when I went to the hardware stores, people there could not advise me properly. They
Oh
did
yeah,
not know what's in stock. They did not
nope,
know a
nope,
solution to the problem I had.
no,
They just they were quick to say, "Look, replace the sink." That's the
oh
easiest thing
sure,
to do.
sure.
I'm sure, and I even spoke to the plumber, he's 70 something years old, so he's a retired plumber, and he
Uh,
says, honestly, there's no parts that will fit this. You'll have to figure something out. And he didn't want to suggest anything.
Wow.
So I have no skill in that department, and I'm
Right,
trying to
right,
figure
right.
out how to
Well,
rig something up, you
here's what
know?
I will tell you.
Mm.
Sink the hardest part about replacing, is it a kitchen sink?
Hmm.
Okay.
Kitchen
So the
sink.
hardest part about replacing a kitchen sink is getting the old one out.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I say this only because I've done it before.
Mm.
Um, but typically stainless steel metal sinks, um, they're not real hard to get out. Well, they're hard
Right.
to get out the old, if they've been in a long time. But the new ones go in fairly quickly. Um, and seriously, if you buy your own parts,
Hmm.
this is the thing, and this is part of the secret. I mean, if you don't feel confident in your skills,
Hmm.
um, you could hire a guy to do the plumbing and stuff. But
Right.
at the same time, you're better off buying your own parts because you'll get a better price. Just have it
Correct.
ready for him, and all he's got to do is come in and provide labor and um, maybe a fitting or two in case you
Hmm.
forgot something.
Right.
But other than that, have everything ready. So you
I'm
probably
working on it.
it sounds like you've got one of them really old sinks that had the
Yes, that's
the
exactly
faucet
right.
in the center, and you had that extra hole off to the side for the spray nozzle.
That's right. And
Oh
there's a
yeah,
leak on the faucet. So
yeah.
I got the guy over, and he says we will try to change the faucet first before we change the sink.
There you
So
go.
I'm thinking that we can go that way. So it's not going to be that expensive. The
Good.
bigger point though is that people are not willing to do a
Oh
proper
no,
job.
no,
The hardware is not helping me. The
no,
people that are paid to work and advise can't come up with solutions. And they have a
no,
whole hardware there. It's
no. And
interesting
you're
that
right. I mean, you walk into Lowe's or Home Depot, you already better know how to do the job because nobody there's going to help you.
I'm surprised at that because from the immigrant point of view, you would think that this is a developed country. The people are intelligent. They're working. They know. You have this image that it's a better organized society. And when you get here, they know better off than you are.
Right,
It's
right.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's two schools of thought. So, guys in our age bracket,
Mhm.
okay, we anywhere from 50 to 70 and beyond, we grew up here in America. We grew up where we were educated.
Mhm.
You went and you got taught really well. I mean, for a public school system, the education was there. You learned a lot of things about civics, government, history. They taught all that stuff. Well,
Yeah.
now in the last 20, maybe even 30 years, that's started to go away. And within the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years, with the MAGA people doing away
Mhm.
with all this stuff in the schools, young people, and I don't, it's not their fault, and I don't mean no offense to them, but they're not being educated in any way, shape, or form. They can barely read. They don't know anything
Mhm.
about history. They have no
Mhm.
clue on what kind of style of government is in Washington D.C. Only because they're not being taught in school anymore.
Well, not only
Um,
that, but I think the media also is deliberately dumbing down the content that
oh
people are
yeah,
being exposed to. So
true.
people within the US have no idea what outside the world looks like
That's true.
in
Well,
terms
you know
of like,
what?
go ahead, let me hear you.
That brings to my next subject because you know going going into a store these days, if you don't know how to do something, if you go to a hardware store, if you already know right now, if you don't know how to do something, you're done. Okay.
Hmm.
Because you're going to get taken advantage of.
Hmm.
But at the same time, overall, the United States itself right now is being taken advantage of in a lot of ways. And it goes
I
back
can
to what
see it.
it goes back to what you were just saying, is that by and large, the media and our government, who is in control of the media,
Hmm.
deliberately wants the American citizens not to be able to think. They don't want us to have any kind of stray thoughts, because that way they keep getting reelected and they can continue their power grabbing and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. But
Correct.
at the same time, I'm going to ask you something, and I don't know if you heard this in the news or not. Okay, because it actually has a little bit of concern because of where you live. Okay. So, did you know that the Russian Navy is going to be in Havana, Cuba here in about 2 weeks?
I saw that. I looked a little bit into it, and I saw that they tend to come every so often. So it's not as if it's a rare event.
Right. Right.
So I'm not that worried about it. I
Well,
remember reading about the
I
missile
mean,
crisis. You are, right? Are you?
oh, yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I did hear Putin's mention that he's going to provide weapons to some of the enemies of the U.S.
Yeah.
if we provide long-range weapons to Ukraine. So it could be
Right.
a tit for tat. And I'm also mindful of the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they tried to put
Mm.
nuclear missiles, if I'm not reading it rightly, in
You're right.
Cuba, and that caused a
Yeah.
whole. It
Oh yeah.
almost brought the end of the world with it.
Right.
So I don't think they will go that far,
No.
but it certainly is provocative enough to make me wonder what Putin is up to. It's not looking good.
Well, let me tell you a little bit of what I heard between Friday and today.
Love
Is
it.
that I heard a couple of days, before that, middle of last week, about the Russian Navy. But the big thing was that these vessels, there's a there's a cruiser, I think it's a cruiser, there's a submarine and some tenders,
Hmm.
supply ships basically.
Hmm.
And they're out on maneuvers, and he's, they they're going to dock in Havana for a few days. But they don't have anything on them other than conventional weapons. Okay. That's
As
what
far as we know.
Yes. Well, that's what Putin is saying. They're just, they got conventional stuff on them, and they're just going in for a port visit. But the timing obviously is perfect. And the only reason for that is simply because of what's going on with NATO and US, starting to do things over in Western Russia right now, and
Hmm.
all of the saber rattling about running missiles farther into Russia than just the border region. So obviously Putin is, you know, saying, "Hey, you guys are getting ready to cross a red line here. This is what I'm going to do to show you what that we mean business." So
Hmm.
there's now something I heard this morning was that Russia has been giving their most second level missiles to North Korea.
No, that's scary because Kim
That's
Jong, he is a nutcase.
uh-huh.
He's a
Yeah.
nutcase.
Yes. So we already know that, from news broadcasts and stuff that have gotten leaked out, that North Korea has been giving stuff to Russia,
Right?
and North Korean missiles have been, the remnants thereof have been found on Ukrainian battlefields.
Hmm. I
Well,
saw that. I saw that.
the trade-off apparently is Russia gave North Korea some, not their best of the best, but almost the best.
Right?
Um, and so, yeah, we have to wonder, well, what's North Korea going to do with them?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I suspect Putin will do eventually was send missiles to the Houthis.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they're going
Well,
to
you know
be
how
able
he's
to
going to
take
do
out.
that, don't you? You know how he's going to do that. He's going to send them. So they have that new north-south corridor going
Hmm.
from Russia down to Iran and down
Hmm.
into eating it right now.
Hmm.
So you know for a fact that they're going to be sending missiles down to
To
Iran,
Iran.
and Iran
Yeah,
is going to send them down to the Houthis.
correct. And he's going to knock sea traffic in that region of the world. It's crazy, right?
Uh-huh.
Because those missiles can probably take out American warships.
Oh, yes, yes, without a doubt.
So,
Without a doubt.
and you would see, I'm looking at the Houthis. They're not a naval force, and yet they're controlling a giant portion of the sea,
Right. Well, I mean
and
that that
and and they're being
that
bombed, and it's not helping. So, are you are you
no.
are you telling me that America can't stop the Houthis? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it all depends. So,
Hmm.
yes, they could, but they would have to carpet bomb the whole country, and
Correct.
they don't want to do that.
And they don't want to do that because the repercussions would be
Yep.
severe.
Well, I mean, the United States and UK, by themselves, with NATO helping a little bit, but mostly the US and the UK are already in hot water for, helping out Israel.
Hmm.
So they don't really need any more bad publicity, and carpet bombing, Yemen definitely would not put them on the most, favored list of anybody. And I mean, here's the thing. There's another thing that's going on over there too, and there's been a lot of complaints as far as that region of the world about why the Arab nations aren't standing behind the Palestinians. Okay. Well, some of it is religious reasons. I mean,
Hmm.
Shia versus Sunni, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Although
Hmm.
it's not really that big of a deal anymore. Okay. But a lot of it is, for example, Saudi Arabia. Okay. Now we all know Saudi Arabia is an autocratic, monarchy,
Hmm.
and they're relatively benevolent as long as you behave yourself. But other than that, but they're getting ready to sign off on a security deal with the United States. Now, the
Right.
United States has been pushing this for a while,
Hmm.
um, but they're getting ready to actually make this deal. So there's been another thing here in the last few months with U.S. pushing Israel and Saudi Arabia to make a deal.
Hmm.
Of course, now that's out the window with everything that's going on with Israel.
Correct.
So
I
the
saw
U.S.
that.
is still pushing Saudi Arabia to make this security deal for whatever's going on. And of course, we all know that it's all about the United States. And I say this particular way simply because this morning, one of the judge's guests was saying that the powers to be over there in the Middle East are getting really tired of the United States pushing everybody around, and they
Hmm.
really want to push us out. Okay.
Wouldn't surprise me. I was
Yeah.
also looking at the Saudis were considering, I don't know if they did it, not renewing the security arrangement in such a way that they have to sell oil in US dollars.
Yeah.
That was in the news a couple of days. I don't know what became of that though.
Well, it's going to be a thing because Saudi joined up with the BRICS last fall.
So if they stop selling oil in US dollars, that's going to
That's a
hit
big
the
deal.
American economy
Oh, yeah.
really hard.
Uh
I'm
huh.
scared about that.
Yeah. Well, here's what I was telling you last week. You and I need to notify everybody in our family, okay,
Hmm.
and anybody we know, all of our neighbors, anybody you can tell, and that's another part of this show going out to everybody we can talk to here. Let everybody know that we are starting to see signs of a recession here in the United States. It's just
Hmm.
starting, but it's going
Hmm.
to get really bad by the time November gets around. I say really bad. I mean, it's not going to get to be 2008 level between now and November because that's too short of a time. But we're going
Right.
to start feeling it
Hmm.
only because part of it is manufactured from outside influences.
Hmm.
But all these guys that I listen to, um, as far as the economist is concerned, Richard Wolff, um, Professor Mearsheim, and there's one other one that they're all saying the same thing is that within the next probably 3 to 5 years, probably within the next 2 to 3 years, they're saying the United
Right.
States is going to be deep, deep into a recession because we're going to get isolated by BRICS in
Right.
general, but primarily by China and Russia. They're going to shut us off, and it's going to get really
Hmm.
bad.
And then I've been reading that we get into $1 trillion in debt every 100 days,
Yeah,
something like that. It's
yeah,
crazy.
it
Um,
is.
one of the things that I can share being an immigrant is that the economies around the world are not built adequately to do just-in-time deliveries.
Right.
So that means that you'll always find a warehouse full of spare parts. You'll
Hmm.
always find people preparing for water shortages, or there will be power outages. So people prepare for those things knowing that they're coming.
Right.
So, for example, most houses in the island of Trinidad, where I'm from, there is a giant water tank, a couple hundred gallons, because the water
Hmm.
can go for a week. And it can go for a week because there's no spare parts available to run the pumps.
Wow.
You see where I'm coming with, right? So if
Right.
we're going to have supply chain disruptions, you may not get a part for your pump at the actual utility, and you don't get
Mm.
water for a week. So you prepare for that. You have giant
Right.
tanks. In the same
Yep.
way, you may be missing a capacitor for your HVAC. It might be
Mm.
good to have an extra one in your house
Right.
instead of looking for it at the hardware and they tell you there's a 2 week delivery time.
Mm.
So it's we speak in terms of resilience as opposed to just in time. You become more resilient by stockpiling the things that you think you would need ahead of time.
Yeah, I used to do that. I need to
Hmm.
do that a lot more now. I mean, with this
Well,
stuff that's coming on the horizon,
that's
I've
what I'm
already
thinking.
started making a list.
Hmm. It'll be good to share that list with me. I'd love to read it. You know, but I mean,
Well,
if there's an emergency, let's say a hurricane comes through and there's no drinking water, you may
mm,
want to have the means to purify some of that yourself.
right.
It's not
Well,
ways to take care of your sanitation,
right.
your hygiene, and all that.
Well, I mean,
outside of.
cheesecloth and iodine tablets, I suppose.
Well, I mean, we figure it out, right? Ahead
Right,
of time.
right.
Ahead of time. You don't want to be fumbling for it and it's not there.
Well, I'm thinking, when I lived in Texas, we used to have issues with the water and electricity and stuff there. Um, and so we always kept a large stash of, bottled water in hand.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I'm thinking to myself, as much as I've stopped doing that because of all the scare tactics with microplastics, I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, I got to weigh one bad against another bad. What's
Well,
the worst that I need to worry about? The worst I need to worry about is not having water at all.
I
I'd
was
rather
about to
have
bring up
water with a little bit of microplastic than no water at all.
I was about to bring up the microplastic. I just read an article where they were saying that human semen contains large quantities of it,
Yeah.
and it has negative reproductive qualities
Oh, yeah.
about that. You don't want it. You don't want it there. So
No, no.
what I've been doing? It's a little bit crazy, but I get glass bottles and I
Oh, really?
refill those at the at like Walmart or wherever.
Oh, really?
So there's no microplastic in the glass bottle,
True,
and
true.
the source of the water would be a reverse osmosis dispenser that is in the store. So
Huh.
there would probably be some microplastics in that, but
Okay.
I'd rather have as little as possible. So my chain would be uh, reverse osmosis to a glass bottle, and then I
Right.
drink out of glass at home or stainless steel or whatever. I try to avoid plastic
Yeah,
when
I
it comes
don't.
to food.
Yeah, I'm the same way. We don't eat with plastic plates or glass or plastic
No, I've been getting rid
things.
of those. And even those
Right.
paper plates, those disposable ones, those are
Hmm.
covered with PFAS. You don't want to
Yeah.
do those. Get away
Right.
from those.
Yeah, I read that here a while back.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
So,
told my wife. I said, "Yeah, we're not eating out that stuff anymore."
mm-mm, mm-mm.
Uh,
So
I
we
mean,
do glass.
you can go to the store and buy the hardened up cardboard ones that don't have any plastic on them.
Yeah, but they
But
cover them with wax proof, whatever, and I don't trust that.
no,
You
man,
know.
you're right. You're right. You have to be really, really careful about what you get these days. You
Well,
know.
that's the thing. You see a movement towards convenience, but at the cost of it is your own health,
Uh huh.
and
Uh huh.
it's not wise. It's
Well,
just
see, now
crazy
you
that.
give me, we're talking about this. You give me some ideas here. So, like I said, I was thinking, go to Costco and buy several cases of bottled water. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? Instead of spending all that money on that,
Mm-hmm.
I can probably find some recyclable glass,
Mm-hmm.
glass jars or
Mm-hmm.
stuff that people have thrown away,
Mm-hmm.
or it's available somewhere somehow. But if
Yeah,
I
I
bet
got
you, if
mine.
I were to look around a little bit, I could
Mm-hmm.
bring them home and fill them up with water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There would be filters, I suppose, that could filter the microplastics, but I didn't want to go
Cheesecloth,
that far. Cheesecloth,
cheesecloth.
okay, okay, that's something to think about. I
Well,
don't know the Britas and all that, so.
well, let me tell you a little story here. I mean,
Mhm.
it's it's more or less it's survival training. So in the army, we were taught that if you wanted to, you want to filter water, and well, for example, if you're out in the middle of boonies somewhere, you don't have access to clean water, you
Mhm.
carry in your ruck iodine tablets and cheesecloth. Okay.
Right.
And when you want to filter some river water, for example, you do put about 3 layers of cheesecloth together and you make a funnel out of it for
Right.
your water canteen, and you filter your water that way. Now, I don't know, it probably wouldn't do a lot for the really small microplastics, the micro stuff. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But it would filter out a lot of stuff.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Now, I bet you because of all this, I mean, this microplastic stuff is nothing new. So I want to bet that they are coming out with products on the market right now that you could actually filter that stuff out with. You just have to look for it.
You probably have to look for it, yeah.
So
So
it's
that's something to think about. I get my bottles from Amazon. Amazon had some wine jars, like 1 gallon.
uh-huh.
I go to Walmart. I think it costs like 40 cents to get a gallon of water.
So you can
So
buy what? Empty, you can buy just like a case of empty wine bottles?
I get them four at a time, and they're heavy. That's the downside of it. So you
Right.
can't lift four of them at a time.
Right,
So
right.
I fill 4 of them at a time, but
Yeah.
it takes a little bit of effort to get them done. And
Okay.
that's what we drink out of. We drink that.
Right, right, right.
I try
Huh.
not to get the bottled water. We have bottled water, mind you. If there's a hurricane coming through, and it's better to have something than nothing.
Oh,
So I
right,
do
right.
have a couple of plastic bottles filled up, but
Yeah.
other than that, I try to avoid doing the plastic bottles
Right, right.
as
Well, I
much as
mean,
possible.
last year is when I stopped. My wife was always big about having water bottles here, for water. And I told her about all this microplastic and it scared her. So we stopped doing it.
Hmm.
Now I have a really tight water filter on my refrigerator. So
Okay,
that's where I get my clean water at,
yeah,
is
that
through the
makes sense.
filter
Yeah.
system in the fridge.
Hmm.
You know, now whether it takes out microplastics, truthfully, I never asked to. Again,
Fair
I may
enough.
have to look into that. Um,
Fair enough. Fair enough. But
you know,
we're exposed to so many things that in our daily lives that our bodies have not evolved to deal with.
right.
That it's no small wonder that we're breaking down.
Well, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I mean,
and
breaking
then
down like these machines that are on obsolescence.
when you look at the birth rates, for example,
Oh
the
yeah.
birth rates are collapsing, right?
Yep.
And microplastics are being found in semen. So it's not just the microplastics; it's also the PFAS. I wrote an article about that the other day.
Yeah, I remember seeing
Um,
it.
yeah, so we are exposed continuously to a
Mhm.
level of chemical contamination that our bodies just cannot deal with,
Right,
and
right.
it's inextricably linked to modernity. Modern life is based on having those things in the environment. You can't
Yep.
go to a doctor's office without getting exposed to some amount of plastic. The
That's true.
syringes, the needles, everything. Plastics are heavily intertwined into the medical field.
Yep.
So you're not going to be able to have a modern society if you cut back on plastics.
True.
So we're damned if we do and damned if we don't.
Well, and there's a lot of truth to that. And the funny thing about that is I remember growing up on a farm, in the
Hmm.
60s and 70s, and we didn't have hardly any plastic, if any.
Hmm.
Very little. Nothing
Right.
that you would consume. I mean, you
Right.
had your furniture stuff,
Hmm.
minimal furniture, but even in my house, almost everything we had was antique, so it was all made out of wood.
Those are the
Um,
ways. Those are the days.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Good stuff.
and we everything else we did was in glass jars. There was no such thing as plastic bottled water or any of that other stuff.
Right.
Truthfully, I'm thinking back all those years ago, and I don't remember hardly any plastic. I mean, I remember just before I left home in the early 70s, my mom started using Tupperware, but
Right.
that was a relatively new thing for our household in the early 70s.
And
Before that, I don't even remember that. I don't think we even had that. So,
yeah.
that's kind of the thing. I mean, of course, Tupperware obviously is going to be right full of microplastics. So,
And it would have been the plastics that would leach chemicals into your food. It's not going to be the
uh,
safer plastics, if any are
right.
safe.
That's
You
right.
know.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you know that the U.S. military considers PFAS manufacture to be a national security issue?
I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Because
that
it's in
means that
everything.
it's in everything: bombs, bullets, the
Uh-huh.
waterproofing on your guns, the greases.
Well, I'll
They
give you an idea as
mm,
far as like what you're talking about. So we used to have to deal with this chemical called cosmoline in the military. So whenever
okay.
you get a new weapon or a piece of metal for spare parts for machinery, things like that, it would come in a crate and it would be wrapped up in cosmoline and wax paper. And of course, you had to clean all that stuff off with solvents,
Hmm. Oh boy.
petroleum solvents, and
Right.
make it right, and then you could use it. Same thing with guns. I mean, new
Hmm.
guns, break them out of the cases, clean them all up, get all the cosmoline off of them, and then take them out and put them in the armory. But
Right.
and so that's all oil based as far as that goes. Um, but it kind of goes back to everything else. You get exposed to so many different things. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
I mean, I have never heard anybody tell me whether cosmoline in itself was bad for you, but the fact that it's petroleum based, it probably was.
But
um,
if it has any level of PFAS in it, continuously exposed to it through your
Oh,
skin,
right,
it's not
right.
going to be good. It
Well,
can't be
I
good
go
for
back
you.
to even go back to the '70s. Our
Hmm.
military uniforms were fire retardant,
Oh boy.
okay? And so, yeah, and that makes me think that, well, yeah, they probably were loaded right up with that stuff.
Yep, there would be. There would be. So it's again, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You can't
Wow.
have a modern military without those products being available,
Wow, that's scary. Because
and
I
everybody's
remember,
exposed to it, right?
yeah, I remember in the '80s, they switched us out of those old things because nobody liked them, and we
Hmm.
went back to cotton, cotton trousers, blue jean type, cotton trousers and cotton
Right.
shirts, for that. And then later on, I think after I left, they switched out and went to something else. So who knows?
Okay.
But
Who knows?
the camouflage uniforms have changed dramatically. I mean,
Hmm.
when I was in the military, as far as the army, everything was you had your BDUs, woodland camos,
Hmm.
the ones that everybody's familiar with, the green and brown and stuff. Then they switched out to the I forget whatever they called it, some kind of a pin. I don't know. My son
Hmm.
had it in Iraq in 2005, 2006, um, and that was full of all kinds of chemicals.
Right.
Um, and then they switched out now to this other one that some computer system invented, and that's what they're wearing now. And it's I'm sure it's right full of something. It's not so my original uniforms back before all these changes, we're going back to the early 2000s and stuff and late 90s. These uniforms were all made out of cotton or a you know what do you call it variation thereof, but
Hmm.
they weren't full of this chemical stuff. Okay.
Right. Not
Um,
anymore.
no, and oh
Not
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, yeah, it's all different now.
Not
It's crazy.
anymore. It's crazy, yeah. But I mean, I guess the military is considered to be expendable, quote unquote. So these are
Well,
the, right? Uh, Tough nut to swallow.
Well,
Ooh.
as a soldier, we always knew to a degree that we are expendable as far as that goes. It's an expectation that's drilled into you from basic training.
Mhm.
Drill, training, build up your muscle memory so that you don't have to think about what your next move is and all this kind of indoctrination. Don't think about anything, just do what you're told, so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Well, as you get further up into the ranks, you learn to think because you're supposed to take care of the juniors. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So that kind of goes along with, becoming a senior NCO. But at the same time, you're still full of that indoctrination of, the higher ups are telling you, and in this case, it's the Pentagon and that, once you get up to a certain point, the Pentagon's the one dictating everything. They're telling you what uniform to wear, where your unit's going to go, where you're going to deploy to, and all this kind of stuff. What you're going to do when you get there. Those parts you don't have any choice of. Um,
Right. Well, what I'm hearing you saying is that there's a lot of training to build up muscle memory and the
yeah.
ability to follow orders.
Yep.
So, just to turn the direction a little bit, what's happening in Ukraine where those guys are getting 1 week, 2 weeks of training and then sent out into the field to fight?
They're getting killed quickly
They're getting killed quickly, right?
or captured.
But I wonder if they're surrendering because
Oh yeah, they are. They are.
oh
Yeah,
gosh.
this has been going on for 2 or 3, 4 months now. Ukrainians have been surrendering like crazy. They get overwhelmed by the Russians, and rather than just dying to the last man, which is what you know, back in 2022 and early 2023, that was the big thing. Ukrainians were, oh, we're patriots. We're going to fight the Russians, and we're going to die to the last man. Well, that got old quick when these guys started
Hmm.
tired and realized that there were no recruits to come in behind them to give them any relief. They started getting tired. And you
Right.
get to a point where you're so tired that you can barely hold a rifle anymore.
Right.
And some a Russian squad comes in there, surrounds your foxhole, and offers you food, water, and a little sleep. Well, guess what? It's not real hard
Hmm.
to make the right choice.
Oh
And
my
off they go.
goodness. So,
So I don't I've heard two sides of the coin. I've heard stories on the West in the Western media that when the Russians were capturing Ukraine soldiers, they were torturing them, treating them really badly, all kinds of stuff. Okay. Then
Hmm.
I heard from the other side over there that the Russians were treating the Ukrainians better than they were being treated by, their own superiors
Right.
in the trenches and stuff. Um, so, and the other part of that too was Russian soldiers that were initially getting captured in 2022 by the Ukrainians were getting treated really well. And so it's like, okay, you know what?
Who do you believe, right?
Who do you believe? Okay.
And then I've been
I'm,
hearing, I've been hearing.
right now, I don't know who's right, who's wrong. I know a lot of things are wrong. That much I know 2 years into the game. There's a lot of things that are absolutely wrong over there. And I'm watching
Right.
all of that very closely. But at the same time, I'm also kind of watching with jaded eyes on how much Russian propaganda are we getting? I mean, well,
Well,
no,
there will be a
Putin is
lot of
an
it.
autocratic leader, but is he as bad as everybody makes him out to be?
Well, I mean, America has its vested interests, so we have to regard them with suspicion. But
Yeah,
see, this is the thing. What we were talking about education a little while ago and how people can't seem to think critically.
right.
Another thing that I'm noticing is that people are not empathetic. Now, I'm not talking about empathy where you worry about somebody's feelings. I'm thinking about projecting yourself into the mind of, let's say, Putin to
Uh,
figure out what he's thinking and what his possible emotional state might be and where his actions might go that because of you projecting into him where his mind where his state where his mental state may be.
yeah.
Are the people in charge of the military or the politicians even thinking about that? Because I'm hearing people like Lindsey Graham, let's say, speaking about nukes.
Uh, yeah.
Are we going to nuke a great power with nukes? It's insane.
Well, these guys obviously have never set foot on a battlefield.
Nobody wants to do that. I have never set foot in a battlefield. How come I can see that as a terrible thing to do?
Yeah. Well, that's just it. These guys think they're safe. So there's a difference. You and I are average Joes.
I
Okay.
just yeah, yeah.
We make an average annual salary based
Hmm.
on whatever we're going on. Okay. But we're average Americans.
Hmm.
Now, you got a guy like Lindsey Graham, who's a career politician, and he's inundated with lobby money from all sides. He's rolling in money. So he's well protected. Guys like him don't have to worry about bunker busters and nuclear bombs raining down on him because he's got a bunker somewhere or he has somewhere else he can be when this stuff comes.
Right.
He's gonna take care of himself because he's got money to do so. We don't have that kind of money. So
I didn't
we're
know that.
whatever these idiots do. And that's the
Yeah.
sad state of affairs.
So I can look down. I can look into the mind of, let's say, I can project into Putin maybe what he's thinking,
Mhm.
that the West is coming against him. There's
Yep.
economic sanctions. They're
Yep.
talking about opening corridors where they can flood maybe how many
Uh-huh.
hundreds of thousands of soldiers into Russia.
Yep.
What do you think he will do? I think he
He's
would
gonna do what
nuke.
he's gonna do to protect his country.
But he has a doctrine in place, and I think he's going to use it. I think it's going
Yep.
to be nukes,
Yep.
right? If his country is being threatened and all of
That's
that,
right. We
nukes.
don't if you go back to these guys that have been on the judge's show last couple of days, they're all saying the same thing, is that
Mm,
by and large, Putin has yes, he has sent a lot of his troops to the death over there on the western border to try and take care of business. And it's like these guys were saying, the United States started this back in 2008 when they instituted a coup in Ukraine and toppled the democratically elected president that they had, he,
mhm.
just because he was pro-Russian. Okay,
Right.
and it's been that way ever since. So Putin's first aggressive act, when with all of this, with NATO pushing into Ukraine, was to take over Crimea in 2014.
I saw
Okay,
that. Yeah.
and now the further escalation by the West, because they elected Zelensky, and of course he's pro-Western and he's doing all this kind of stuff. So now he's escalated. Now it was all about save me, save me, save me. NATO wants military assets in Ukraine
Hmm.
because they're afraid of the Russians, which there's no reason to be afraid of the Russians, but
Mm.
still, you can temper Russia. You could have tempered Russia with other means than militarily, but of course the U.S. doesn't know any better, and that's one of the biggest negatives that everybody's been talking about the last few days. Is that the United States for the last 50 years has been pushing themselves around the world with their military, and everybody's getting tired of it. Example is the Middle East. Middle
Right.
Eastern countries are pushing back, saying, "Hey, you know what? Go home. All right, we
Hmm.
don't want that stuff here anymore. We got a
Hmm.
better idea. We have a better plan with this whole BRICS thing, and it's a lot more peaceful than what you're offering us.
Right.
So go home. If you don't want to play nice, get out of here. Don't play in our sandbox anymore." And
Right.
it's going to be a thing. So I can see that what's happening too with like this weekend and in the last couple of days, all of these elections in Europe. Okay,
The far
all these
right
all
is
the
cleaning
far
up.
right people, yeah, they're moving in like crazy,
Yeah.
and so you can see, and this is what a lot of people are also talking about. And I've been kind of watching this for a couple of years now, but now you see with all this going on, it's becoming, right to the forefront is that the EU is probably going to end up breaking up, and these countries are going to go back to their nationalistic governments and say, "All
Hmm.
right, we're done here. We're going
Hmm.
to protect ourselves," and so on and so forth. And here we go.
Did I see Turkey join BRICS this week?
Uh huh.
And that's a NATO country, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Well, it may not be
fascinating.
for long.
It may not be for long because they've been trying to get into the EU forever, and they're being
That's right.
denied it.
That's right.
So BRICS has come along, and
That's right.
they say, okay, fine.
Well,
No.
I give you an example. For the last 20 years, the United States has had to basically hold something over their head to keep that Air Force base in Incirlik, Turkey open.
Hmm.
Okay. Because Turkey wanted us when George Bush first went overseas to Afghanistan and he escalated the war in Afghanistan, Turkey said, "Hey, we don't like what you're doing. You need to get out of our base. We're taking it back over."
Hmm.
Well, the United States pushed back and Turkey kept it open.
Right.
And the same thing happened with um, Uzbekistan. They took over an old Russian base there on the Afghan border. And then all of a sudden, the United States was doing bad things. Uzbekistan said, "Hey, no, you know what? We don't want you here anymore. We're booting you out." Okay,
Right.
and that was a really big deal, closing
Right.
down, Karshi-Kanabat. So the United States got all upset about that because they needed that staging point.
Hmm.
Of course, now it's water behind the ears as far as it goes. That's all gone now. But Incirlik, though, if they close up Incirlik, that's a big deal.
Wow, I
That's
can
one of the
imagine.
biggest Air Force bases that they have over in Eurasia right now. And if
Right.
Turkey closes the Americans out of that,
Wow.
that'll hurt them really bad.
Yeah, Turkey is, as I understand it, the largest land army in Europe,
Yeah,
right? So
they're the meanest.
you're gonna lose you're gonna lose a giant
Yeah.
part of NATO.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
they need to be really careful about how we push ourselves around the place
Well,
in
you and
taking
I
money
both know
away.
the United States right now is not in the mindset to even think about caution right now.
It's interesting that we're like a giant dinosaur that's trapped in a tar pit and trying to escape and just lashing out,
That's right.
not calming down and saying, let's figure this thing out. Let's be calm. Let's be deliberate. Let's try to build alliances rather than break everything up around us.
Yeah. No, unfortunately, the United States is behaving like a spoiled child.
Yeah.
They've been the bully on the playground for 50 years, and they don't like not being the bully anymore, and they're fighting it. And we can
Mm,
see the results. And like I said before, the results are going to be the American citizens who are going to take the brunt of all of this because we're going to see, inflation go through the roof. We're going to see a
yes.
recession, and we're going to see
Inflation.
imports get shut off,
Hmm.
and we're going to see, overseas bases getting closed out and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
And it's going to be an absolute mess here in the next 5 years.
I'm seeing it just as you're seeing it because China just dumped a whole bunch of treasuries.
Uh-huh.
Right. Where's all the US gonna go when people around the world decide that they don't need as much?
Well,
It's
that's
gonna
just it.
Are they gonna keep printing it? and printing it. That's
That's the
inflationary.
scary part. Yeah. Are
That's the
they going to
scary
just keep
part.
printing money? Whew. I mean,
Well,
that's
I
tough.
mean,
That'll kill us.
the choice is to tax people more
Ooh,
or cut back on spending. Those are the choices,
right.
right? The wealthy people are not going to let them let them tax them, right?
And
So,
the thing is, if we had the right government in Washington, then they could levy those taxes.
but who is the
But
right government?
well, that's just it. That's
Right? I'm
the
seeing
that's
this.
the existential question.
Red and blue are on the same page. They're doing the
Yeah.
same
No,
pieces
no.
of
I
crap.
mean, there's obviously the Republicans and the Democrats need to go away. Okay. Um, I was talking to your Miss Francis quite a lot here the last few
Mm.
days. She's
Okay,
she's really she's really cool.
I,
Okay.
I
I
like her.
like her.
I
All
like
right.
her.
Yeah. Her and I have been talking a lot about this. And one of the things that we talked about was she's a big Bernie Sanders fan. And I
I
agree
would
with her.
I would have voted for Bernie. If I had the
Absolutely.
opportunity to vote for Bernie, I would have voted
Uh-huh.
for Bernie.
Absolutely. Yep. I would have been right there.
Yeah,
So,
it's
you know,
sad what
it
we're
is
left with.
sad. Now he's too old, but it's like I was telling her this morning. I wrote her a message this morning saying,
Mhm.
what we need is a younger version of a Bernie Sanders.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like you want to go up for political office, my friend.
Oh, no, no, no. I'm too old. No,
You're younger
no.
than Biden. Come on.
Yeah, well, no, no, that's all right. I'll let that pass. Well, listen,
Yeah, very much.
it's getting to be close to the hour, so I'm going to cut this short here.
No trouble
Okay,
at all.
all right. But yeah, this was really good because you and I, despite from different backgrounds,
Mhm.
see eye to eye on so many things.
Well, I think it's because of our age. We're looking at it from the perspective of time and maybe
Right,
an educational background that is similar. We can see, we can think.
right. Well,
It's
the
we're
other
not
part of it too is I spent probably a good portion of my adult life outside the United States.
there you have an outside perspective, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I spent most of my life outside the US, and now that I'm in, I can see, what people
Yeah,
are not seeing.
yeah. We don't have blinders on.
Yeah, yeah, it's scary that the way people are just going about their lives thinking that everything will stay the same. I can't
Right,
see it.
right. Yeah, that's
I
pretty
can't see
scary.
it
Yeah, I know. Well, listen, I'm gonna close this out. So I appreciate you coming back.
anytime.
I, you know what? If you're up with that, we'll keep doing this. We don't have to do it every week, obviously, but I could see us making a regular thing about this as things
I'm
pop up
cool
in
with
the
it.
news.
I'm cool with it. Whenever you're ready, just let me know.
Okay. Well, very good. All right, Mitch. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you later.
Anytime, my friend.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's all I have for you guys here this week. A pretty interesting conversation. As I said, Mitch and I are pretty much eye to eye, um, even though we have different backgrounds. And so I would like to see a lot more people with backgrounds that are not quite mainstream and listen to this and see what happens. Maybe we can change things around here in the future. So with that, we'll call it a day, and I'll talk to you guys all again next week. While I still have your attention, I want to tell you about how you can support this podcast and my efforts in general. This podcast will continue to remain free to subscribe to on all the major mobile podcast apps, on my YouTube channel, Krana Biha, and for the first 30 days on my Substack page, Krana Biha, the Tree of Life at Substack.com. With that in mind, I'm asking for donations of any amount. I decided that I would rather ask for donations instead of charging subscriptions, so everyone has an opportunity to watch or listen to this podcast everywhere in the world. All I'm asking for is help in defraying the cost to produce and distribute this podcast and maintain my website. I have set up a donation tab on the Village Oak Tree webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.cronabiha.com, which are all linked to PayPal for your security. This way you can use any currency you wish from around the world, providing PayPal is available to you. Any amount's appreciated. Now, about my website. The easiest way to find it is to copy it from the background behind me if you're watching this video. If you're listening to an audio version, copy the website name from the podcast logo shown. Search for it and enjoy your visit. Lastly, I'm trying to sell some copies of my book, Fugitives in the New United States, which can be found at major book retailers around the world, such as Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and Lulu. You can also buy from me direct through the bookstore page on my website. If Fugitives in the New United States is available in hardcover, paperback, and digital form. Free if you're a Kindle subscriber. It's written for young adults and older, so it's safe. If this were a movie, it'd be rated PG. Look for Fugitives in the New United States at your favorite book retailer and enjoy it. If I sell enough, I'll find the time to write the second book in this series. So I want to thank you for your support, even if it's just a like and a subscribe on my social media accounts. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed it, and that you'll return again next week for another episode of the Village Oak Tree. This is Shawnee. I hope you will continue to let me come to your village to bring you some news from the outside that might make you think a wee bit. Please share this podcast with your friends and relations. The more you share, the more we can convince enough people to make a better place to live in here around the world. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. May your hand always be stretched out in friendship and never in want. Slán go fóill.